There is a show about a blue jay and a raccoon who did not want to do their jobs, and somewhere between the video games and the skipped chores and the supernatural disasters they caused before lunch, it became one of the warmest things Cartoon Network ever made. Regular show ran for 8 seasons, from 2010 to 2017, and in that time it hid genuine grief inside a Yeti who never stopped skipping, 1,000 small acts of loyalty inside a friendship that looked like chaos from the outside, and one of the most quietly devastating origin stories ever written inside an 11-minute flashback about a high school prom. It gave its most stoic character a love he never recovered from. It let its gentlest soul end a cosmic cycle through kindness instead of force. It built an entire mythology on the grounds of an ordinary park, and then asked what it means to belong somewhere. Tonight, we are moving slowly through the best episodes, the moments that mattered, and why a show this funny carried this much heart. Welcome to Regularverse. Let's get started. Free cake, where the magic began. There is something about the very beginning of a show that tells you everything. Not the pilot episode necessarily, not the first scene, but those early moments where the creative team finds its footing and starts moving with confidence. For Regular Show, that moment came 5 episodes into its first season. The episode was called Free Cake, and it aired on October 4th, 2010. It was 11 minutes long. It involved a chocolate cake, a surprise party, and a group of floating magical babies who lived somewhere in space. By the time those 11 minutes were over, Regular Show had quietly announced exactly what kind of show it intended to be. Understanding what makes Free Cake work requires knowing a little about where Regular Show came from. The series was created by J.G. Quintel, who also voiced the main character, Mordecai. Quintel had previously worked on Camp Lazlo and The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack for Cartoon Network, before developing a short film for the network's development project called The Cartoonstitute. That short was the seed that grew into Regular Show. From the beginning, Quintel was interested in something specific: the feeling of being in your early 20s, working a job you did not particularly care about, filling your days with small pleasures and low stakes, and occasionally stumbling into something enormous. The show was, in some ways, about the texture of being young and slightly aimless, and Free Cake captures that texture beautifully, even while sending its characters into outer space. The setup is pure early Regular Show. Mordecai, the tall blue jay with good intentions and questionable follow-through, and Rigby, the small raccoon with poor impulse control and even poorer planning, are watching television when they see a chocolate cake at the park snack bar. They want it badly. The problem is that Benson, their boss and the park manager, a gumball machine who runs the whole operation, will not hand it over unless there is a legitimate reason to celebrate. Mordecai and Rigby realize that their co-worker Skips has a birthday coming up. They also know that Skips, the large white yeti who serves as the park's muscle and its encyclopedia of practical knowledge, always disappears on his birthday. He has never once attended a celebration of any kind, but Mordecai and Rigby decide that this is beside the point. The point is the cake, and Skips has a birthday, and those two facts can be made to work together. This opening section of the episode operates as a comedy of self-interest. Mordecai and Rigby are not trying to do something nice for Skips. They are trying to get chocolate cake. They dress the scheme up in the language of generosity, telling Benson that Skips deserves a party because he is always there to help everyone. That part is actually true. Skips is always there when things go sideways, and things go sideways constantly at the park. But the motivation behind the speech is the snack bar cake, and both Mordecai and Rigby know it. The show plays this completely straight, letting the viewer see exactly what is happening without ever commenting on it. That restraint is one of Regular Show's greatest early strengths. The writing trusts the audience to notice what the characters are doing without needing the joke to be underlined. Benson eventually agrees. The party is arranged, and that night, Mordecai and Rigby go looking for Skips in the woods behind the park, because Skips has gone off by himself the way he always does on his birthday. What they find when they locate him is something they were not expecting at all. Skips is performing a ritual. He is moving in a specific, ancient-looking pattern, totally absorbed in whatever he is doing. And when Rigby startles him and breaks the ritual, everything changes very quickly. A vehicle descends from above. A figure named Gary steps out of it. Gary takes Skips away. Mordecai and Rigby, being Mordecai and Rigby, climb into the back of the vehicle without fully thinking through the consequences. What follows is one of the most quietly impressive introductions of a mythology that any animated series had attempted in its first season. The vehicle takes everyone to a place that exists somewhere beyond the park, beyond the sky, in a kind of celestial realm, where a group of baby-sized beings float in the air wearing crowns and robes. These are the guardians of eternal youth. They are the ones who granted Skips his immortality, and the arrangement they made with him is very specific. Once a year, on his birthday, Skips must perform the spirit dance that renews the terms of the agreement. If the dance is not completed, the agreement is void, and Skips loses his immortality, which means he ages, which means, given how old Skips actually is, that he ages very rapidly indeed. The show handles this with a lightness that keeps it from becoming dark while still making the stakes feel real. When Skips Skips begins to age and crumble, the scene is not played for laughs in the usual sense. There is a kind of gentle sadness to it. Mordecai and Rigby, who got everyone into this situation by being selfish about a cake, have to stand up and explain themselves. They tell the Guardians that the interruption was their fault, not Skip's. That the only reason the ritual was broken was because two idiots wanted chocolate cake and dragged an immortal being into a birthday party he had specifically been trying to avoid for his entire existence. The Guardians, it turns out, love cake. This is played as comedy, but it is also the resolution that the episode has been quietly building toward. Rigby's first instinct is to refuse to hand over the cake they went through all of this trouble to get. Mordecai has to talk him out of it. He does, and the moment where Mordecai reminds Rigby of what actually matters here is a small but genuine beat of decency from a character who spends much of his time being exactly as lazy and self-interested as Rigby. Skips is restored. Everyone goes back to the park. Pops, the gentle lollipop-headed owner's son who lives there, has brought a spare cake just in case. The spare cake is vanilla. Mordecai and Rigby are devastated. There is a lot packed into that ending. The joke is that after everything they went through, they still do not get the chocolate cake. But underneath the joke is something the show will return to again and again across its 8 seasons. The idea that doing the right thing rarely comes with a reward, and that most of the time you do it anyway, and that the relationship you protect by doing it is the actual thing worth protecting. Mordecai and Rigby gave up the cake to save Skips. They get vanilla. They are annoyed. They move on. The friendship holds, the way it always does. Free cake also introduces several things that will become permanent parts of the show's mythology. Skips' immortality, established here, becomes one of the most quietly interesting ongoing threads in the entire series. The fact that a large, silent, extremely competent Yeti has been alive since the 1800s, has watched generations of people come and go, has outlived things and people that mattered to him, is something the show will explore in much greater depth later. But the seed is planted in this episode, in the image of Skips performing a ritual alone in the woods in the dark, trying to keep himself alive for another year, not wanting anyone to know about it. Gary and the Guardians of Eternal Youth become recurring characters, returning in multiple later episodes to help the park crew out of various supernatural situations. Their presence in the show's world gives regular show a cosmological layer that sets it apart from other animated series of the era. This is not just a show about a park. The park exists within a universe that has its own ancient agreements, its own cosmic beings, its own rules and consequences. Free cake introduces that universe gently, almost as a joke, and then lets the show spend 7 more seasons filling in the details. The episode also establishes the emotional grammar of regular show at its best. The jokes work because the characters feel real within their absurd circumstances. The heart of the episode works because the show never asks you to stop laughing in order to feel something. The comedy and the warmth exist simultaneously, and one enhances the other. When Mordecai talks Rigby into giving up the cake, it is funny, and it is also genuinely touching. And the show achieves both of those things in about 30 seconds without making a big deal of either one. For a first season episode, the ambition is remarkable. Most animated shows spend their early episodes establishing basics. Who are the characters? What is the setting? What kind of jokes does this show tell? Regular show does all of that in its first 4 episodes, and then uses Free Cake to announce that it is also going to do something more. It is going to build a mythology. It is going to give its characters histories that extend beyond what the viewer can see. It is going to take 11 minutes and use them to suggest that there is an entire universe operating just beneath the surface of this quiet, ordinary park. That is a lot for a cartoon about 2 friends who want chocolate cake, but that is exactly what regular show always was. Something small on the outside that turned out to be much larger on the inside. Free Cake was where that started. Everything else the show built, it built on this foundation. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Free Cake set the whole thing in motion, introducing Skips' secret and the strange, beautiful mythology living just beneath the surface of the park. Next, we move into Season 2, where Mordecai and Rigby find 4 baby ducks in a fountain and discover, completely by accident, that caring about something tiny can lead to the biggest feelings of all. Section 2, a bunch of baby ducks, 4 small ducks, and a very big heart. Season 2 of regular show arrived with the show already finding its voice, already comfortable in its own skin. The first season had proven that the formula worked. Small problems escalating into supernatural chaos, friendships tested and reaffirmed, and underneath all of it, that gentle warmth that made the show feel like a place you wanted to return to. Season 2 pushed all of those qualities further, and it produced one of the most beloved episodes in the entire run of the series. The episode was called A Bunch of Baby Ducks. It aired on June 6, 2011. It was about 4 small yellow ducks found at the bottom of a drained fountain, and somehow, by the end of its 11 minutes, it had become one of the most emotionally resonant things things the show ever made. The episode begins the way so many regular show episodes begin, with a chore that nobody wants to do. Mordecai and Rigby have been assigned to clean out the park fountain. After losing a game of rock, paper, scissors, Rigby is stuck starting the hose to drain the water. Once the fountain is empty, the two of them make an unexpected discovery at the bottom. 4 baby ducks, small and yellow and completely alone, are sitting in the drained fountain, looking up at whoever found them. Mordecai scoops them up into a bucket so they can be moved. That, as far as both of them are concerned, is where their involvement ends. They figure the mother duck will come to claim them. They start to walk away. Rigby, for reasons he does not immediately understand, finds that he is unable to leave. The baby ducks have followed him. They are waddling along behind him in a small, determined line, copying every move he makes. Mordecai finds this extremely funny. Rigby, who is not known for his patience or his nurturing instincts, finds it considerably less funny. The show has established that when a young animal sees the first living thing it encounters after hatching, it locks onto that figure as its parent. This is called imprinting. The ducks have imprinted on Rigby. They believe he is their father, and no matter what Rigby does to shake them off, they refuse to be shaken. The comedy of the early section of the episode comes entirely from the specificity of Rigby's discomfort. He is not angry at the ducks. He is not cruel to them. He is just a raccoon in his early 20s who did not plan to become a parent this morning and is having some difficulty adjusting to the new reality. He tries to lose them by running. They waddle faster. He tries to scare them by pretending to do a karate chop. They watch carefully and then immediately attempt the karate chop themselves. This is where the episode starts to shift slightly, because the baby ducks learning the karate chop is funny, but it is also the first sign that these ducks are more capable than they appear. Something about them is unusual. Something about them is paying very close attention. Benson arrives and makes the situation official. The ducks need a home. That is the assignment now. In addition to the fountain cleaning that still has not been finished, Mordecai and Rigby take the ducks to the coffee shop where their friend Margaret works, to see if she might know someone who could take them. Margaret and her co-worker Eileen come out to look. Eileen, in a reference to the classic Danish folktale The Ugly Duckling, asks one of the baby ducks if Rigby is mad at it because it is not a beautiful swan yet. The ducks respond by karate chopping each other. They are not ugly ducklings. They are small, yellow karate practitioners, and they are getting better at it. Margaret suggests the animal shelter. They take the ducks to the animal shelter. At the shelter, just as Mordecai and Rigby are about to hand them over, the ducks demonstrate their new skill on a dog that was approaching too aggressively, then on a snake. The animal shelter declines to take them. The ducks have been classified as, in the shelter's assessment, thugs. Mordecai and Rigby put up flyers around the park. A man in a truck sees the flyers and comes to collect the ducks. Something about him is immediately wrong, and Mordecai and Rigby refuse him. They go back inside to play video games while they think about what to do next. The baby ducks beat Rigby at the video game 3 times in a row. This is both funny and quietly significant. The show is building, piece by piece, a picture of these ducks as something genuinely remarkable. They are not just cute, they are fast learners. They are emotionally perceptive in a way that goes beyond what an ordinary baby duck should be capable of. When they look at Rigby, there is something in those small, round eyes that suggests they understand him better than he understands himself. Then the man in the truck comes back. He is a duck collector, and he has no good intentions. And while Mordecai and Rigby were inside playing video games, he has put the baby ducks in a cooler and driven away. The shift in the episode is immediate. Both characters, who have been treating this whole situation as an inconvenient errand, are suddenly running. Rigby jumps on the windshield of the truck. Mordecai slips at the pool and goes down hard. Everything is moving fast. And then the duck's mother arrives. She is large. She allows Mordecai and Rigby to climb on her back. She flies after the truck. This is the point where the episode, which has been a gentle comedy for most of its running time, reveals that it has been something else entirely underneath. The mother duck is not a joke. She is not treated as a punchline. The show handles her arrival with a kind of simple dignity that cuts through the absurdity of the situation. 2 20-something park employees are riding a large duck through the air to rescue 4 baby ducks from a man in a cooler truck. And somehow, the emotion of the scene is completely real. The fight that follows is physical and chaotic. Mordecai and Rigby get inside the truck. The truck flips and crashes back into the park fountain. The duck collector kicks Mordecai into a tree. Then he pulls out a cane that conceals a sword. He draws it on Rigby. Rigby, who is not a large animal and is not particularly brave, takes a step back. And that is when the baby ducks, watching their friend in danger, watching their mother on the ground, do something that the episode has been quietly building towards since the first moment they copied Rigby's karate chop. chop. They fuse together. This is played completely straight. 4 baby ducks merge into a single large humanoid figure with a duck's head and an enormous muscular body. The show draws on the visual language of Super Sentai and Power Rangers, the giant robot transformation sequences that generations of children grew up watching, and applies that language here with complete sincerity. The hyperduck, as this form is called, defeats the duck collector efficiently and then stands there in the wreckage of the fountain, having done what needed doing. Then the mother duck approaches. She calls to her ducklings. The hyperduck separates back into 4 small yellow ducks, and Rigby, who has been resisting this whole situation since the first moment those ducks started following him around, has to make a choice. He can see that they belong with their mother. He knows that. Mordecai points out gently that Rigby can barely take care of himself, which is true, and Rigby knows it is true. And so the ducks go back to their mother, who carries them away. The episode does not linger on this. It does not turn the farewell into a long, drawn-out emotional scene. The ducks leave. The mother takes them. The fountain is now, incidentally, clean. Rigby watches them go. The show moves on. But in that small, quiet moment of watching them leave, regular show does something that it will do many times over the course of its run. It takes a character who appears to have no emotional depth and reveals that the depth was always there. Rigby did not want the ducks, and then he did. And then he let them go because that was the right thing, even though it cost him something. He will probably never see them again. He does, as it happens, see them again. They return in later seasons, grown and formidable. And when they do, the show remembers this episode. The connection established in this 11-minute story becomes a thread that runs through the whole series. That is part of what makes A Bunch of Baby Ducks so important. It is not just a good episode in isolation. It is a foundation for a relationship that the show will return to. And when it does, the weight of this original episode gives those later moments their meaning. What the episode ultimately demonstrates is one of regular show's core creative principles, that caring, even when it is reluctant and inconvenient and completely unplanned, changes something in the person who does it. Rigby did not choose to care about those ducks. They chose him. And the process of being chosen, of being followed and imitated and looked at with complete trust, turned into something real. The comedy never disappears. The karate ducks are still funny at the end of the episode, but they are also genuinely heroic, and Rigby, watching them leave, is genuinely moved. Both things are true at the same time, and the show never asks you to pick one or the other. That is the gift of A Bunch of Baby Ducks. It is funny and warm and strange and sad and completely its own thing, and it manages all of that in 11 minutes without ever feeling rushed or forced. Early Season 2. Regular show at its very best. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Baby Ducks gave us an unexpected story about reluctant love and letting go. Now we move to another Season 2 episode, one that raises the stakes as high as they can go. Skips makes a terrible mistake. Rigby pays for it, and the only way to fix things involves sitting across from Death himself at an arm wrestling table. Section 3. Over the Top. Skips versus Death. Season 2 of regular show was doing something quietly ambitious across its full run. Episode by episode, the show was expanding the emotional range of its characters. It was not content to let Mordecai and Rigby be simple slackers, or to let Skips be simply the reliable one who fixes things. It was interested in the interior lives of these people, in what they carried beneath the surface, in the specific kinds of pain that a character might feel and never fully express. Over the Top, which aired as the 22nd episode of Season 2, is the episode where that ambition found its most powerful early expression. It is the episode where Skips, the show's most stoic and capable figure, makes the worst mistake of his long life and has to sit with what that means. The setup, like so many regular show setups, begins with something small. Skips and Rigby are arm wrestling. This is not unusual. Physical contests of various kinds happen regularly at the park, and Skips, who is enormously strong and has been alive since the 1800s, is not typically someone that Rigby would challenge and expect to win. But Rigby has found something. A device called the Playco Arm Boy, a mechanical contraption that attaches to the arm and dramatically amplifies its strength, turning whoever wears it into a formidable opponent in any arm wrestling situation. Rigby conceals the device under his sleeve. He challenges Skips, and he wins. Skips demands a rematch. Rigby refuses. This is the moment where the episode begins its turn towards something darker, because the refusal is not just Rigby being a poor sport. It is Rigby enjoying the power he has over a situation. He knows he cheated. Skips does not know that yet. And there is a cruelty, small but real, in watching Rigby relish the moment, in watching him turn down the rematch and enjoy the look on Skips's face. Skips does not show much. He rarely does, but he is bothered. Being beaten fairly by someone he underestimated would be one thing. Being beaten in a way that does not feel right and not being able to explain why it does not feel right is something else. Skips breaks Mordecai and Rigby's game console. He does this in a fit of frustration that is completely out of character for him. Benson witnesses it and confronts him, not angry so much much as genuinely confused. Skips is the one who fixes things at the park. He is the one everyone else comes to when something goes wrong. Watching him destroy something deliberately, watching him unable to explain his own behavior, is disorienting. Even Skips himself seems unsettled by it. He tells Benson that Benson would not understand. It is a clumsy, defensive thing to say, and it reveals something important. Beneath all of Skips's competence and calm, there is a kind of pride that he does not talk about and does not examine. Being beaten hurt him in a way he was not prepared for. Mordecai goes to Skips and tells him the truth. The arm wrestling match was rigged. Rigby used a device. Skips did not lose. And while that information should resolve the situation, what it actually does is release something that had been building under the surface. Skips goes to find Rigby. The confrontation is not drawn out. Skips pulls the Playco arm boy out of Rigby's arm during what becomes a second match, and the force of pulling the device free sends Rigby crashing through a table. The impact kills him. Not cartoon kills him, not temporarily inconveniences him. Regular show makes the consequence plain. Rigby is dead. There is a small, still moment where that fact sits in the room with everyone, and the show does not soften it. Mordecai's response to Skips after this happens is one of the most devastating lines in the early seasons. He looks at Skips and tells him that he could not let it go, and he hopes he got what he wanted. Then he leaves. The line is not dramatic in the way that dialogue in a more conventional animated show might be. It is quiet and tired and genuinely hurt. And it lands because the show has spent enough time building the relationship between Mordecai and Rigby that the viewer feels the weight of it. Rigby is gone. Mordecai is standing in the room where it happened, talking to the person who caused it, and he has nothing left to say except that small, cold observation. Skips is alone with what he has done, and this is where Over the Top becomes the episode that it is. A lesser version of this story would have Skips immediately spring into action, immediately begin solving the problem, immediately locate the path forward. But the show takes a moment first. It lets Skips stand in the wreckage of his own action. He is immortal, and he is very old, and he has seen and survived a great deal. None of that helps him now, because he caused this. His own pride, his own inability to let something go, led directly to the death of a young man who was, despite all his flaws, a friend. Death arrives. Not metaphorically. Death in regular show is a character, a specific being who exists in this universe to collect the souls of those whose time has come. He is rendered in a particular way by the show. Tall, British accented, genuinely menacing in a way that the show's more colorful villains rarely manage. He is not here by accident. He knows what happened. And when he looks at Skips and tells him that he is there for Rigby, there is no malice in it, but there is absolute certainty. This is what death does, and Rigby's soul is owed. Skips makes a proposal. He challenges Death to an arm wrestling match. If Skips wins, Rigby gets his soul back. If Death wins, Death gets Rigby's soul and, additionally, Skips' immortal soul. This is the arrangement that Death has wanted for a long time. The Guardians of Eternal Youth made Skips immortal, and that immortality has always been a point of frustration for Death, who would prefer to have everyone's soul eventually, including Skips's. The match is something Death cannot refuse, because the prize is too appealing. He accepts. What follows is the episode's central sequence, and it is constructed with a care and a specificity that lifts it well above a simple contest. Skips trains. He has to prepare for the arm wrestling match the way any other person would, even though he has been alive for centuries and is physically formidable in most respects. The fact that he needs to train at all humanizes him in a way that his usual competence does not. He is not automatically the solution to this problem. He has to work for it. He has to want it badly enough to suffer for it. The match itself is one of the best animated action sequences in regular show's first 2 seasons. The show pours genuine tension into it. Death is not a character who bluffs. When he tells Skips that someday he will have his immortal soul, it is not a villain's idle boast. It is a statement of patient certainty from a being who has infinite time to wait. During the arm wrestling match, there are moments where Skips appears to be losing, and the show does not undercut those moments with comedy. The stakes are allowed to be real. Rigby's soul is on the table. Skips's soul is on the table. The outcome is not guaranteed. There is a detail in the match that says something important about the show's approach to these characters. Skips, who confronted Rigby about cheating in the original arm wrestling contest, uses the Playco arm boy to defeat Death. He conceals it, the way Rigby concealed it. He wins with it. The show does not draw explicit attention to this irony. It does not stop the action to point out what just happened, but it is there, and it rewards the viewer who notices it. The character who was so wounded by another person's cheating that it led to disaster is the same character who uses that exact same method to undo the disaster. He is not above it. He never was. That pride of his, the pride that started everything, could not withstand being beaten, and when the thing he needed was available to him, he used it, the same way Rigby did. There is something else worth sitting with in that detail, something the episode earns by being precise about who Skips is and what the arm wrestling contest originally meant to him. Skips did not challenge Rigby after discovering the cheating because he wanted to win. He challenged him because being beaten in a way that felt wrong had created a splinter in him that his usual composure could not dislodge. He is a being being who has survived centuries by maintaining a particular relationship with his own capabilities, by knowing what he can do and trusting that knowledge. Rigby's cheat did not just beat him in a contest, it introduced uncertainty into something Skips had always been certain about, and that uncertainty is what broke the composure and led to everything that followed. Understanding that changes how the arm wrestling match with death reads. Skips is not simply using the available tool to win, he is using the same tool that caused the problem to fix the problem. And the irony of that is the episode's quiet thesis statement. The thing that wounded his pride is the thing that saves his friend. Pride and love are tangled together in Skips in a way the show will spend several more seasons unpacking. And Over the Top is the episode that first makes that tangle visible. It is also worth noting what the episode does with Benson in these scenes, because Benson's role in Over the Top is small but carefully placed. When Skips breaks the game console, Benson confronts him not with anger, but with genuine bewilderment. He is used to Mordecai and Rigby breaking things. He is not used to Skips breaking things. The disruption of that expectation unsettles him in a way that his usual managerial frustration does not quite cover. He does not know what to do with a version of the park where Skips is the one who has lost control, because Skips is the one everyone else leans on when control is lost. His bewilderment in that scene is one of the more honest reactions in the episode, because it mirrors the viewer's own disorientation at seeing the park's most reliable figure behaving in a way that has no precedent. The episode also establishes something about the park's social ecosystem that will remain true for the rest of the series. The park functions because everyone plays their role, and the roles are held in place not by formal structure, but by mutual understanding. Benson manages. Mordecai and Rigby cause problems. Skips fixes them. Pops provides warmth. Muscleman Death, after losing, honors the agreement. He restores Rigby's soul. Rigby is alive again, blinking and confused and asking what happened. Before Death leaves, he delivers a final line to Skips. He tells Skips that someday he will have his immortal soul. It is not a threat in the usual sense. It is a promise, patient and enormous, from a being with all the time in the world. The show never fully follows up on this thread, but it does not need to. The promise exists in the universe. It gives Skips's immortality a texture it did not have before. He is not simply eternal. He is eternal with that conversation hanging over him. The resolution of the episode is handled with the same restraint that characterizes its best moments. Skips talks to Rigby. He explains that he should not cheat, and that using the arm wrestling device the way he did was wrong. Rigby takes the lesson in, more or less. There is no grand emotional catharsis. There is no long speech about friendship or responsibility. The show is too honest for that. What happened was serious and caused real harm, and both characters know it, and life continues. That is what regular show does with its more difficult moments. It lets them matter without turning them into lessons delivered from a podium. Mordecai gets a small but important moment too. When he sees that Rigby is alive, the relief in his expression is complete. He was angry at Skips in a way that felt final. The line he delivered after Rigby died, "The hope you got what you wanted," came from a place of genuine grief. Seeing Rigby back changes the quality of the room. It does not erase what happened, but it makes it possible to breathe again. And watching Mordecai breathe again is one of the quieter pleasures of the episode's ending. Over the Top is significant for several reasons that extend beyond its immediate story. It establishes death as a recurring presence in regular show's universe, and the version of death the show created is one of the more interesting takes on that concept in animated television. He is not comedic. He is not a bumbling antagonist. He is genuinely dangerous in a way that feels consistent every time he appears. The show takes him seriously, and because it takes him seriously, the scenes he appears in carry real weight. The episode also does something essential for Skips as a character. Before Over the Top, Skips was the competent one, the one who knew things, the one who fixed things, the one the others came to when the situation had gone beyond their ability to manage. He was defined almost entirely by his usefulness. Over the Top reveals that usefulness is something Skips built around himself for reasons that go deeper than simple helpfulness. He has pride. He has wounds. He makes mistakes that come from those wounds, and those mistakes have consequences that his competence alone cannot repair. The episode gives him a history that runs beneath the surface of every scene he appears in afterward. From Over the Top forward, Skips carries more weight than he appears to, and the viewer knows it. This is the quality that distinguishes the best regular show episodes from merely good ones. The show is not satisfied with characters who function. It wants characters who feel. It wants to know what is underneath the function, what makes these particular beings the way they are, what they have lost, and what they protect, and what they cannot quite forgive themselves for. Over the Top answers those questions for Skips in the space of 11 minutes, and it does it without ever losing the show's essential energy, without becoming heavy or self-important, without forgetting that it is also supposed to be entertaining. The arm wrestling match with Death is thrilling. The conversation between Mordecai and Skips in the aftermath is genuinely uncomfortable in the best way. The ending is quiet quiet and true. Regular Show, in only its second season, was already operating at a level that most animated series never reach. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Over the Top showed us the depth beneath Skips' silence and the cost of letting pride go too far. Now we move into Season 3, and one of the most beloved Halloween specials in Cartoon Network history, where the whole park crew gathers to tell each other ghost stories, and the show proves it can be genuinely unsettling when it wants to be. Section 4. Terror Tales of the Park, the Halloween special that started it all. Halloween specials are a tradition in animated television. Most shows do at least one, many do several. The format is familiar enough that it runs the risk of feeling routine. Seasonal costumes, a spooky premise, maybe a reference or two to classic horror films, and then everything returns to normal before the credits roll. Regular Show looked at that format in 2011, 3 episodes into its 3rd season, and decided to do something more interesting with it. Terror Tales of the Park aired on October 10th, 2011, and it was not a single Halloween episode, it was an anthology. 3 separate horror stories, told by the park characters around a kind of campfire, each one distinct in tone and construction, each one willing to go further than most animated shows would consider going. The episode proved that Regular Show could do horror, and not just horror as background noise, actual horror with genuine menace, and an ending or two that stayed with viewers long after the episode finished. The structure of Terror Tales of the Park is borrowed directly from one of the most famous Halloween traditions in animated television. The Simpsons had been producing its Treehouse of Horror specials since 1990, and by 2011 that format, 3 short stories presented as an anthology with a framing device, had become something of a genre unto itself. Regular Show understood this. The show was never shy about its influences, and the parallel to Treehouse of Horror is acknowledged implicitly in the very construction of the episode. But where Treehouse of Horror leaned into parody and irreverence, Terror Tales of the Park had something different in mind. It wanted the stories to feel like the kinds of stories that people actually tell each other at Halloween. Not polished, not comfortable, the kind that go to a strange place and stay there. The framing device is simple and effective. Mordecai, Rigby, Skips, Muscleman, High Five Ghost, and Pops are all together in the park on Halloween night. Someone suggests telling scary stories. Pops goes first, because Pops always volunteers for things, and Pops always misses the point of what everyone else is trying to do, and this time is no exception. His story is about a doll named Percy, who has an unusual desire to draw on people's faces. In Pops's telling, this is genuinely frightening. In everyone else's telling, a doll with a marker is not a horror story. Muscleman says the story was lame. Rigby agrees, and Muscleman, stung by this, says he can do better. The episode's first full story belongs to Muscleman, and it is called Death Metal Crash Pit. The setup draws on something that has been established as background detail in the park. There is a place called the Crash Pit, a large hole in the ground where cars are driven in and destroyed for entertainment. Muscleman's story involves a Halloween night version of this activity, and it goes wrong in the way that things in horror stories always go wrong, with a group of people encountering something they cannot explain and being picked off one by one. The story is played for both comedy and genuine dread, and the balance it strikes is characteristic of what makes the episode work. Muscleman is telling this story to show off, to prove he can be scary, and the show lets him succeed at that more than any of the other characters expected. Then comes Rigby's story, the one that gives the episode its most discussed and most analyzed sequence. The story is called In the House, and it begins on Halloween night with Mordecai and Rigby trick-or-treating. Rigby is dressed as a robber. Mordecai has constructed an elaborate costume involving a fake family of children so that he can claim multiple houses worth of candy under the guise of accompanying his kids. The scam works, up to a point, and then the two of them approach a house that looks like no one is home. Rigby eggs the house. Against Mordecai's warnings, against every instinct that should be telling him to leave this particular house alone, Rigby eggs it. The house belongs to a wizard. This is established quickly and without ceremony. The wizard comes out of the house, looks at what Rigby has done, and delivers a curse. The next morning, strange things begin happening to Rigby. His body starts changing. His furniture rearranges itself. By the end of the day, Rigby has been transformed into a house, a full house, a structure with rooms and a foundation and a door and windows, and inside that structure, his personality and his consciousness are somehow still present, experiencing everything that happens to his new form. What makes In the House work as horror rather than just surreal comedy is what happens next. The wizard moves in. He brings his cat. He begins using the Rigby house as a home, with complete disregard for the fact that there is a person inside the walls who is aware of everything happening to him. Then the other park characters begin to arrive, looking for Rigby, not knowing what they have walked into. And one by one, in a sequence that escalates quickly and does not flinch from its own darkness, they are killed inside the house by the wizard's curse. The deaths are not graphic in the traditional sense. Regular Show was a children's show, technically, and it operated within within the visual constraints that implies. But the show found ways to make each death feel genuinely disturbing within those constraints. High Five Ghost picks up a disconnected phone despite everyone's warnings and is liquefied, then sprayed out of the speaker. Skips is pushed into the fireplace. Benson is drowned in a toilet. Pops is pulled into a dresser that disappears. Mordecai is decapitated. Each one is quick, specific, and slightly surreal in a way that makes it more unsettling than a more conventional depiction would be. The wizard remains invisible throughout, which is a choice that pays off consistently. The threat that cannot be seen is always more frightening than the one that can. Rigby, in his form as the house, is the last one left, and the wizard turns on him. He eggs the house, mirroring exactly what Rigby did at the beginning of the story. Then he cracks a giant egg on Rigby, crushing him. The punishment fits the crime in a way that feels like an actual folklore logic, the kind of consequence that old stories used to deliver, where the thing that causes the problem is the same thing that ends it. The wizard cursed Rigby for egging a house. The story ends with Rigby being egged as a house. There is a rightness to the shape of it, even within all the absurdity. Then Rigby reveals, back in the framing device, that it was just a story. He made it up. The whole thing existed only in the telling. The park crew is unimpressed, or at least pretending to be, and the episode moves on. But In the House does something that good horror always does, which is leave a residue. The images stay. The invisible wizard stays. The specific, quiet cruelty of each character's death stays. The story was made up, but the feeling it generates is real. There is a detail buried in the episode that the show references only once and never makes a big deal of. During the sequence inside the Rigby house, when Mordecai is searching through the rooms, the camera briefly passes a framed photograph on the wall. The photograph shows Eileen. This is Rigby's house. He put her picture on the wall. At this point in the series, Rigby and Eileen's relationship is not defined. She is a recurring character, a coffee shop co-worker of Margaret's, someone who appears in episodes but has not been given a central storyline. The photograph is a quiet signal, placed without comment, that something is there beneath the surface. Rigby, the character who has shown the least interest in emotional openness of anyone in the main cast, has a photograph of Eileen inside the walls of his unconscious mind, in a story he constructed about his own fears. The show plants this and walks away. The payoff comes seasons later. Pops then offers to tell another story, and Muscle Man immediately shuts that down. The episode gives Muscle Man the last word in the anthology, a small grace note that acknowledges his genuine success in setting the tone. The whole gathering in the park, the costumes, the competitive storytelling, the way each character approaches horror differently, reveals more about who these people are than a straightforward episode about the same characters would. Pops' idea of a scary story says everything about his gentle, slightly disconnected relationship with the world. Rigby's story says something about what he is afraid of, what it would feel like to be trapped and helpless and responsible for the harm that came to the people around him. Even Muscle Man, whose humor usually runs toward loud and broad, finds something in his story that lands. Terror Tales of the Park also introduced a tradition that the show maintained for the rest of its run. Every season from season 3 onward produced a Halloween special, 6 in total, 1 per season. Each one found the characters in a different configuration. Each one pushed the format in a different direction. The space era of the show produced a Halloween special set in the cosmos. The final season's Halloween special took place entirely away from the park, but all of them trace back to this first one, to that gathering in the dark with everyone in costume, trading stories that were supposed to be scary and sometimes genuinely were. The success of Terror Tales of the Park also pointed towards something the show's creative team had understood from the beginning, but was now demonstrating with complete confidence. Regular show could modulate. It did not have to be the same thing every week. The tonal range available to it was wider than most animated series of its era were willing to explore. An episode could be warm and gentle in the way that Free Cake was warm and gentle. It could be emotionally heavy in the way that Over the Top was heavy. It could be a horror anthology with real menace and real deaths, even if those deaths existed inside stories within the episode. The show was not locked into a single register. It could move, and moving was part of what kept it alive and interesting across 8 seasons. There is something worth saying about the decision to make the horror in Terror Tales of the Park feel earned. Regular show did not approach the episode as a novelty. It did not treat horror as decoration, as a seasonal costume that the show could put on for one episode and then take off. The writing team understood what horror requires: specificity, patience, and the willingness to follow a premise to its uncomfortable conclusion rather than deflecting at the last moment. In the House follows its premise. A wizard curses Rigby. People die inside the curse. The curse resolves in the shape of the original transgression. That is a complete horror story, told without apology. The animation choices throughout the episode reinforced the tonal shift. Regular show in its normal episodes had a bright, flat visual style that was warm and inviting. The Halloween special uses shadow differently. The wizard's house is darker. The interiors of the Rigby house have a quality to them that the park's interiors do not. shot. The character expressions in the horror sequences are drawn with a slight exaggeration that tips away from comedy and towards something less comfortable. These are small choices, but they accumulate into an episode that feels genuinely distinct from the rest of the season. There is a reason that Terror Tales of the Park consistently appears near the top of any fan ranking of regular show episodes. It is not just nostalgia for a good Halloween special, though that is part of it. It is the recognition that the episode represents regular show operating at the full extent of its creative range. It is funny and scary and strange and emotionally honest and structurally clever, all at once, in 22 minutes, without losing the thread of who these characters are and why spending time with them feels worthwhile. That is a difficult thing to do. The episode makes it look easy, which is the clearest sign that a great deal of care went into making it. The tradition it started ran for 6 seasons. The legacy it built is still felt whenever someone who grew up with regular show thinks about what the show could do when it was really trying. Terror Tales of the Park was the show really trying, and it produced something that holds up not just as a great episode of regular show, but as a genuinely effective piece of horror comedy, full stop. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Terror Tales of the Park proved that regular show could go dark and find something true in the darkness. Now we arrive at Season 3's most celebrated episode, the one that won the show an Emmy Award, the one that sends Mordecai into an omelet-eating contest to rescue his best friend from a coma, and the one that most completely captures what regular show was always about at its core. Section 5. Excellent. The Emmy that said it all. There are episodes of television that win awards because they are technically accomplished. There are episodes that win because they tackle something important, something weighty and serious that feels deserving of recognition. And then there are episodes that win because they do something rarer and harder. They take a premise that sounds completely absurd and execute it with such genuine feeling, such precise emotional intelligence, that by the end of 11 minutes, you have forgotten the premise was absurd at all. Excellent is that third kind of episode. It aired on February 27, 2012, as the 17th episode of regular show's 3rd season. It won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Short-Form Animated Program. It beat Phineas and Ferb. It beat Adventure Time. And it did all of that with a story about a trucker's hat and a 12-egg omelet. Understanding why Excellent works the way it does requires stepping back for a moment and thinking about what the show had been doing leading up to it. By Season 3, regular show had established its core formula thoroughly enough that a viewer coming in cold could understand the shape of any given episode within its first 2 minutes. Someone wants something, the pursuit of that something causes the situation to escalate beyond all reasonable proportion. The supernatural gets involved, the characters either succeed or fail, and either way something small but true is revealed about who they are and what they mean to each other. Excellent follows that formula, but it follows it with a precision and an emotional depth that the show had not quite reached before, and it does so by making the stakes personal in a way that the formula alone does not guarantee. The episode begins the way the best regular show episodes begin, with Mordecai and Rigby doing exactly what they are supposed to be doing, which is nothing. They are watching television when a commercial comes on for a local restaurant's eating challenge. The challenge is called the Excellent Challenge. It involves a 12-egg omelet loaded with chili and cheese, accompanied by 2 biscuits and a fruit bowl. And whoever finishes the entire thing within 1 hour wins a hat. The hat says, "I'm excellent" on it. It is a trucker's net hat, the kind of hat that costs almost nothing and means almost nothing in any objective sense. Rigby sees it and becomes immediately, completely, and irrationally obsessed with it. This is a specific kind of Rigby episode. The show returned to this well several times across its run, and it always worked for the same reason. Rigby's desires are always completely disproportionate to the things that generate them. He does not want sensible things in sensible quantities. He wants ridiculous things with a ferocity that makes perfect sense from the inside. The hat is objectively not worth the effort he is about to expend on it, but to Rigby, in this moment, it is the only thing in the world that matters. He describes it to Mordecai with a reverence that the show plays completely straight, and then he makes Mordecai take him to the restaurant. The restaurant agrees to let Rigby attempt the challenge. The waiter is reluctant, for reasons that become clear later, but agrees after Rigby wins the argument. The omelet arrives. It is enormous. Rigby begins eating. Within moments, the situation becomes a medical emergency. Rigby is allergic to eggs, not mildly allergic, seriously, dangerously, life-threateningly allergic. He goes into anaphylactic shock at the table. He is loaded into an ambulance. At the hospital, the doctor delivers the assessment with a clinical calm that makes it more alarming rather than less. Rigby is in a coma, and the number of eggs he consumed before his body reacted means he may not come out of it. Mordecai is at the hospital with everyone else when this news comes in. And in the ambulance, just before Rigby went under, Mordecai made him a promise. He told Rigby he would win the hat for him. He said it the way you say things to someone who is slipping away from you, as a way of holding them there for one more moment. And now, with With Rigby in a hospital bed and the promise sitting in the air between them, Mordecai has to decide what that promise actually means. Benson's response to the situation is the episode's first genuinely uncomfortable moment. He arrives at the hospital, surveys the scene, and tells everyone that they have all learned a valuable lesson about finishing their work before pursuing personal activities, and that they should get back to the park. This is Benson at his most tone-deaf, a quality the show gave him periodically to remind the viewer that beneath his genuine concern for the park and its operations, there is a person who has difficulty separating professional authority from basic human decency. Mordecai's response is to punch him in the face, not in a comedic way, not in the exaggerated, cartoon violence way that the show usually handles physical confrontations. He punches Benson with genuine anger, and the punch lands, and the room goes quiet. The moment lands so hard because Mordecai does not punch people. He is the more measured of the two. He is the one who usually talks Rigby down from bad decisions rather than escalating them. Watching him lose control in that hospital room, watching the grief and the helplessness come out as violence, is one of the more honest emotional beats in the entire third season. Benson deserved it in the moment. The show knows that, and it does not immediately walk the moment back. Mordecai goes to the restaurant and attempts the challenge. He fails. He does not come close. The omelet is enormous. The time limit is strict, and Mordecai is a 20-something Blue Jay who has not been trained for this. He comes back and throws his plate at the wall in frustration, a second moment of physical expression from a character who usually contains himself, and the combination of the two outbursts, the punch and the plate, builds a portrait of someone operating at the very edge of what he can hold together. His best friend is in a coma. He made a promise. He cannot keep it. He does not know what to do. This is where Benson does something that the episode earns carefully. He comes back to the hospital. He apologizes. He had time to think about what he said, and he knows it was a stupid thing to say, and he says so plainly, without hedging. Then Skips tells Mordecai a story. There was a man named Jonathan Kimball who used to work at the park. Like Rigby, Kimball was obsessed with the excellent hat. He spent years attempting the challenge, studying it, filling a notebook with every observation and advantage he could identify. Eventually, he figured out how to beat it. He told everyone, and nobody believed him. He went to attempt the challenge alone, and he was never seen again. Skips has Kimball's notebook. He got it from Kimball's old locker. And with some encouragement from Benson, who is now fully invested in helping rather than managing, Mordecai begins to train. The training montage that follows is one of the most purely enjoyable sequences in the show's third season. It uses the song "I Need a Hero" as its backdrop, a choice that manages to be both completely sincere and gently self-aware at the same time. Mordecai trains hard. Benson coaches. The other park workers contribute in various ways. The notebook contains specific techniques, specific sequences for eating the omelet that minimize the difficulty and maximize the chances of finishing within the hour. By the time Mordecai goes back to the restaurant for his second attempt, he has done everything he can possibly do to prepare. The second attempt is where the episode reveals what it has been building toward in terms of its action structure. Mordecai begins the challenge. He uses the techniques from the notebook, including a specific method involving crumbling the biscuits into water to make them easier to consume quickly. The waiter, watching Mordecai do this, tries to stop him. This is the first moment where the episode reveals that the waiter's reluctance earlier was not just attitude. He was trying to protect people from something. When he tries to intervene, Benson steps in, then Skips, then Muscle Man and High Five Ghost. The restaurant staff mobilizes. The park crew holds the line. What began as an eating contest becomes a full ensemble fight for the right of one person to finish a meal, and the show plays it with complete commitment, giving the battle genuine choreography and real stakes. Mordecai finishes the omelet. The hour ends. The waiter steps back, and then something happens that the episode has been preparing for without fully showing its hand. Mordecai is transported. He finds himself in a different place entirely, a cavern of some kind, where a knight in armor waits for him. The knight is the excellent knight, and he explains that this is the final stage of the challenge. Mordecai must choose the correct hat from the collection available. If he chooses wrong, he dies. The knight points to a skeleton in the corner. The skeleton is Jonathan Kimball, who came this far, chose a golden crown instead of the net hat, and did not survive the choice. This is the moment where Excellent reveals its full shape as a regular show episode. The eating contest was never just an eating contest. It was a quest. The hat was never just a hat. It was the object at the center of a genuine trial with genuine consequences. And the thing that saves Mordecai is not his strength or his preparation or even the notebook. It is his memory of Rigby. Rigby described the hat before he fell into the coma. He described it specifically, with the enthusiasm of someone who had been thinking about it for too long. A trucker's net hat. Mordecai remembers those words. He looks at the collection of hats in front of him and picks the one that matches what Rigby told him, and the knight confirms it. Excellent, the correct choice. Mordecai brings the hat back to the hospital. He puts it on Rigby's head. Rigby wakes up. The episode gives this moment room to breathe without overdoing it. The relief in in the room is complete. Rigby is awake, the hat is on his head, and everything that Mordecai went through to get to this moment was worth it because his friend is alive and conscious and wearing a trucker's hat that says, "I'm excellent" on it. Then Rigby sees a commercial for a new eating contest, a steak and eggs challenge at a place called Steak Universe. He immediately starts talking about doing it, suggesting that Mordecai eat the eggs while he eats the steak, as if the last 24 hours did not happen. As if he did not just spend a significant portion of his life in a medically induced coma caused by eggs. The park crew's response is to reach for the hat on Rigby's head, the implication being that removing it might send him back under. It is the episode's final joke, and it works because it is so completely true to who Rigby is. The lesson has not been learned. The hat has been won. Rigby is alive, and the next disaster is already forming somewhere in the middle distance. What the Emmy voters recognized in Excellent, and what fans of the show have recognized in the years since, is that the episode is a near-perfect distillation of everything Regular Show did well. The comedy is specific and earns its laughs without relying on shock or spectacle. The emotional core is genuine without being sentimental. The friendship between Mordecai and Rigby is treated as the serious, load-bearing relationship that it actually is within the show's universe. And the absurdity, the magical hat cavern, the excellent night, the skeleton of Jonathan Kimball, serves the emotion rather than undermining it. The supernatural elements are not distractions from the feeling. They are the vehicle for it. Mordecai did not go through all of that for a hat. He went through it for Rigby. The hat was the reason, but the friendship was the cause. And Regular Show knew, from the very beginning of its run, that the friendship was the only thing that really mattered. Every episode in some way was about that. Excellent just said it more clearly than most. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Excellent gave us Mordecai at his most determined and Rigby at his most vulnerable. And the result was the episode that defined what this show could be. Next comes Season 4, where Regular Show brings back every villain from its first 3 seasons for one enormous battle that the park will never quite recover from. Section 6, Exit 9B, Every Enemy, One Final Fight. There is a particular kind of storytelling that only becomes possible after a show has been running long enough to have built something worth looking back on. It requires history. It requires the audience to have spent enough time with a world that returning to its past feels like reunion rather than recap. Regular Show reached that point at the start of its 4th season, and it marked the occasion with an episode that was unlike anything it had attempted before. Exit 9B aired on October 1st, 2012, as the first episode of Season 4 and the 80th episode of the series overall. It was a half-hour special, double the usual length. It brought back nearly every villain the show had ever introduced. It featured a brainwashed park crew, a time machine, a full-scale battle, and a new intern who saved the day by signing a piece of paper. It was enormous and chaotic and deeply sincere, and it remains one of the most satisfying things Regular Show ever produced. The episode begins before the opening credits, in a sequence that announces immediately that something different is happening. The tone is wrong from the first frame. The music that plays over the cold open is a dark remix of the show's familiar theme, distorted and heavy in a way that signals disruption rather than comfort. A mysterious bearded figure is moving through the park with a laser stun gun, hunting the park workers one by one. The chaos is immediate and total. Buildings are being destroyed, characters are running. The show's usual visual warmth is gone, replaced by something urgent and slightly frightening. Within the first 2 minutes, before the episode has even properly introduced its premise, Regular Show has established that the world the viewer knows is under serious threat. Only Mordecai and Rigby escape. Rigby is holding a document, a piece of paper that will become central to the episode's resolution, though neither of them fully understands its significance yet. Mordecai has the time machine from a previous episode, a device introduced in the Season 3 finale, Bad Kiss, and he uses it now to get them out. They disappear into time as the bearded figure destroys the house behind them. The sequence is about 30 seconds long. It is more dramatically efficient than most animated shows manage in their full running time. 2 months later, Mordecai and Rigby land in a version of the park that is almost unrecognizable. The house is gone. Construction equipment covers the grounds. A sign announces the coming of Exit 9B, a freeway interchange that will be built directly through what used to be the park. And the park workers, the people who have been part of their lives every day, are gone. Not dead exactly, but absent. They have been brainwashed. They have been given new identities, new jobs, new lives entirely separate from the park and from each other, and none of them remember who they are or who Mordecai and Rigby are, or anything that happened before the bearded figure arrived and changed everything. The brainwashed versions of the park workers are one of the episode's quietest pleasures, and the show gives each of them a new identity that is funny in a specific way. Skips, the enormous, immortal Yeti who has spent centuries fixing problems and keeping secrets, is now running a modest auto repair shop. He wears a plain shirt. He has a sign. He is perfectly competent and completely ordinary. Pops, the gentle, lollipop-headed man whose emotional warmth has always been one of the park's defining qualities, is wearing a mustard-colored shirt and hat, and accepting rides in exchange for butterscotch ripples, still himself in the most essential ways, even within the brainwashing. Muscle Man, the show's resident chaos engine, has become a professor of quantum physics. He walks to work carrying a briefcase. The joke works on multiple levels because Muscle Man as a physics professor is absurd, but it is also a specific kind of absurd that says something about the character. Even when he has been erased and rewritten, the show gives him a version of himself that is still recognizably his. Mordecai and Rigby have to bring them back one by one. The method is different for each character, and the show uses these recovery sequences to do something genuinely moving. It turns the act of remembering into something that feels valuable. Each recovery involves triggering a memory of a specific shared experience, and the flashbacks that play during each recovery sequence pull from real episodes across the show's first 3 seasons. Skips remembers when Rigby slaps him, and his mind floods with images from Diary, Death Punchies, Over the Top, and others. Pops is brought back by a butterscotch ripple and remembers moments from Karaoke Video, Sugar Rush, Brain Eraser, and more. Muscle Man responds to the phrase, "Do you know who else?" which is the beginning of his signature joke, and the flashbacks that follow are from Trash Boat, Fuzzy Dice, and Gut Model, among others. Each recovery is structured the same way, but the repetition does not feel mechanical, it feels cumulative. Each character who comes back adds weight to the group that is reassembling. The show is making an argument, quietly but consistently, that the relationships these characters have built over 3 seasons are the most important thing in their shared world. The brainwashing did not erase who they are at the deepest level, it only covered it. And what uncovers it, every time, is the specific texture of a shared memory, something that only makes sense within the context of this particular group of people in this particular park. High Five Ghost's recovery is the smallest and the most affecting. He has been working as a pizza delivery ghost, floating around in a uniform, separated from every person he knows. When Muscle Man gives him a high five, the physical contact is enough to start the process, and the flashback that follows goes further back than the others. It shows High Five Ghost as a child, as a teenager, moving through the years up to the present. The show is not usually given to extended reflections on its characters' histories. High Five Ghost is often a background presence rather than a central one. Giving him this moment, this small and genuine flash of a whole life, is a grace note that the episode did not need to include and is better for including. Once the park crew is fully reassembled, the situation becomes confrontational. The bearded figure, who has been present throughout the episode as a looming threat, finally reveals himself. He is Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr., the son of a villain from the Season 1 episode, High Score. In that episode, Mordecai and Rigby defeated a giant floating head named Garrett Bobby Ferguson by beating his high score in an arcade game called Broken Bones. The head exploded in a wave of brain matter. GBF Jr. was watching. Everything he has done since, the plot to destroy the park, the brainwashing of the park workers, the construction of Exit 9B, has been in service of a single goal: revenge for his father. He wants to make Mordecai and Rigby feel what it is to lose everything they care about, and he wants his father to be proud of him. This is where the episode opens the portal. GBF Jr. adds the final piece to Exit 9B's construction, and the completed structure tears a hole in reality. And through that hole come the accumulated enemies of 3 seasons of regular show. The Night Owl from Season 2, the Urge from Trash Boat, Howard Fightington and his zombies from Grave Sites, the Destroyer of Worlds, Hot Dogs from Meet Your Maker, the Hammer from Rage Against the TV, GBF Sr. himself, reconstituted and enormous and furious. They pour through the portal and surround the park crew, who have just gotten out of the cement the bearded figure buried them in. And for a moment, the situation appears completely unwinnable. Then, Skip summons allies of his own. This is the episode's turning point, and it lands the way it does because the show has spent 3 seasons building the relationships that make it possible. Gary arrives, Death arrives, the same Death who arm-wrestled Skips for Rigby's soul in Season 2. The same Death who promised he would have Skips's immortal soul someday, here now to help rather than claim. The god of basketball, who appeared in the episode Slam Dunk, arrives. The Guardians of Eternal Youth, the floating babies who maintain Skips's immortality, arrive. The baby ducks from A Bunch of Baby Ducks, fully capable and ready to fight, arrive. Tecmo, from Skips vs. Technology, arrives. Every ally the park has ever made comes back at the moment they are needed. The battle that follows is the largest action sequence regular show had produced up to that point. It is kinetic and loud and packed with references that reward viewers who had been watching from the beginning. The Lemon Chef from Just Set Up the Chairs fights the Destroyer of Worlds and is killed in the collision, his second and final appearance in the series. The baby ducks transform into their hyperduck form and take on enemies that no individual character could handle. Death moves through the battlefield with the calm efficiency of someone who has been doing this for longer than anyone else present can comprehend. The show gives every major character a moment in the fight, night, and because the episode is double length, it has the time to do so without rushing any of them. Thomas is present throughout all of this. Thomas is the new intern, introduced in the opening chaos of the episode, a college student who showed up for his first day of work and found the park in ruins. He has spent the entire episode on the periphery, watching, unable to help in any meaningful way, at the mercy of GBF Jr., who uses him as a convenient target for casual cruelty. He is a stranger to the park's history and to its relationships. He has no stake in any of what is happening. And yet, at the episode's critical moment, when the battle is raging and the portal is still open, and GBF Jr. still controls the legal status of the land, it is Thomas who resolves everything. He has been carrying the document that Rigby was holding when they escaped. He signs it. The document makes Exit 9B illegal. GBF Jr.'s plan collapses. The portal closes. The enemies disappear. Throwing coffee in GBF Jr.'s face first, then signing the document. That is Thomas's contribution to the battle for the park. It is absurd. It is also completely in keeping with the show's understanding of how things get resolved. Regular Show was never a show where the biggest muscles or the most powerful magic won the day. It was a show where the right action at the right moment, however small that action might seem, was the thing that mattered. Thomas did not know the history. He did not know any of these people. He just saw what needed doing and did it. GBF Jr.'s last words, shouted into the sky after his plan has fallen apart, are a plea to his father that he is sorry for failing him. GBF Sr. responds with a drawn-out no of his own. The two of them are gone. The park begins to return to what it was, and in the quiet that follows the battle, the park crew stands together on the grounds that nearly ceased to exist, and the show takes a breath before the season continues. Exit 9B is not the deepest episode of Regular Show. It does not do what Excellent does with intimacy, or what Over the Top does with character interiority. What it does instead is demonstrate the show's breadth. It demonstrates that 3 seasons of careful, specific storytelling had built a world with enough weight that a story drawing on all of it simultaneously could hold together. Every villain who came through that portal was a reference to something that had already happened. Every ally who arrived to help was a relationship that had already been established. The battle meant something because the history behind it meant something. The episode announced the start of Season 4 with the confidence of a show that knew exactly what it had built and was not afraid to use all of it at once. That confidence would carry Regular Show through 4 more seasons, through space and graduations and final battles, and it all grew from this, a half-hour special about a freeway interchange and everything it threatened to erase. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Exit 9B showed what the show became when it used its full history. Next, we go deeper into that history than the show had ever gone before, following Skips back to the 1800s to learn the story he never told anyone. Section 7. Skip's story. The saddest origin story. There is a particular kind of episode that a long-running animated series earns rather than simply produces. It cannot be made in the first season or even the second. It requires time. It requires the audience to have lived with a character long enough that learning something fundamental about them feels like a privilege rather than an exposition dump. Skip's story is that kind of episode. It aired during Season 5 as the 22nd episode of that season, and it did something that Regular Show had been quietly promising since the very first time Skips performed his ritual dance alone in the woods at night in Free Cake. It went back. It showed where he came from, who he was before the park, before the immortality, before the centuries of accumulated knowledge and deliberate silence. It showed the version of Skips that existed before Skips was Skips at all. The episode begins in the present, at the park, with Mordecai and Rigby doing something they do often and without much thought, annoying Skips. The specific annoyance this time involves swimming too soon after eating, a rule that Skips enforces with unusual seriousness. Mordecai and Rigby find this funny. They cannot understand why Skips, a being who has survived centuries of supernatural encounters and physical dangers that would destroy almost anyone else, is so insistent about something as mundane as waiting after meals. When they push him on it, Skips sits down and tells them a story. The story is his own. It is the story of how he became what he is, and it begins in a high school sometime in the 1800s, though the show renders that high school with a visual style that owes more to the 1980s than to the 19th century. The lockers, the clothes, the music, the social dynamics all carry a particular era's texture, even within the historical setting. It is an anachronism that the show commits to completely, and it works because the emotional truth of the story does not depend on period accuracy. It depends on something more universal than that. The young version of Skips is not called Skips. He is called Walks, because unlike the present-day Skips, he has not yet developed the perpetual skipping motion that defines him. He is a teenager, large and capable, the way Skips has always been large and capable, but unfinished in the way that teenagers are unfinished. He has been expelled from multiple schools for fighting. He has just transferred to a new one, the school where the Guardians of Eternal Youth run the student council, where immortal beings of various kinds are navigating the social hierarchies that high school creates, regardless of how old or powerful its participants might be. Walks arrives already carrying a reputation and already looking for a reason to use it. The social landscape of the school is given to the viewer through a brief tour conducted by a character named Gareth, who walks through the various groups and cliques that have staked out their territory. Athletes, bookish types, dramatic students, goths, and others occupy their specific corners of the school's world. The tour is quick and slightly comic, but it establishes the setting as a real place with real social pressures rather than a simple backdrop. These are not abstract teenagers. They are beings who have been navigating each other for long enough that their hierarchies have calcified, and Walks is the disruption that arrives from outside them. The disruption Walks cares most about is not social, it is Clorgbane. Clorgbane is the bully of the school, the Guardians of Eternal Youth's evil brother, a being of considerable power who operates with the casual cruelty of someone who has never faced meaningful consequences. He gives wet willies. He starts fights. He moves through the school as if it exists for his benefit, because for a long time, it has. Nobody challenges him. Nobody wants to absorb the cost of doing so. The Guardians know he is dangerous. They have tried before and failed. Walks, newly arrived and carrying no history with Clorgbane and no particular fear of consequence, is the first person in a long time to look at him and not look away. The reason Walks stays and fights is not purely about justice. It is about a girl. Her name is Desdemona, and the show introduces her with the careful attention it reserves for characters who matter. She is smart and kind and dressed in a way that belongs entirely to the 1980s aesthetic the episode has chosen, and she has a warmth to her that the show conveys not through description, but through the specific quality of her interactions with everyone around her. She is the kind of person who makes the room better by being in it. Walks notices this the way young people notice things that matter to them before they have the vocabulary to explain why they matter. Their relationship develops across a montage that the show structures with genuine tenderness. They spend time together. They talk. They move through the school's world in a way that is specific to two people who are discovering that the other person is worth paying attention to. The montage is intercut with scenes of the Guardians of Eternal Youth constructing something, crafting an object of power that will become important later in the episode. The parallel editing gives the romance a weight that it might not otherwise carry in such a compressed amount of screen time. Love is being made. Power is being made. The two things are happening simultaneously, and they are going to collide. Clorgbane's presence in all of this is a constant pressure. He bullies Walks. Walks responds by standing his ground, not because he is trying to be a hero, but because standing his ground is the only thing he knows how to do. The history he brings to this school, the expulsions, the fights, the reputation, is not incidental to his character. It is the shape that his particular kind of courage takes before it has learned to be anything other than instinct. He is not wise yet. He is just someone who does not back down. And in this context, at this moment, that quality is exactly what the situation needs, even if it comes at enormous cost. The night of the prom arrives. The theme is Under the Sea. Walks brings Desdemona. The gymnasium is decorated with the particular earnestness of a school event that students have worked hard on and that will be remembered fondly for exactly that reason. Everything in the sequence has a fragility to it. The fragility of a good night that is good precisely because it is temporary, because the people in it know at some level that it will not last, and love it more for that knowledge. Walks and Desdemona dance. The Guardians watch from nearby with a kind of ancient fondness for the proceedings. Then Clorgbane arrives. He does not come to participate. He comes to destroy. The confrontation that follows is physical and serious, and the show handles it with the gravity that the situation requires. The fists of justice, the object the Guardians have been constructing throughout the episode, are brought out. They are the weapon that has been made specifically to defeat Clorgbane, and they are given to Walks because Walks is the only one willing to use them. The fight moves through the gymnasium with the energy of something that has been building for a long time finally breaking open. Clorgbane is powerful. Walks is determined. The battle damages things around them. The ceiling takes damage. Debris falls. Desdemona is struck by falling debris from the ceiling. She does not survive. The show communicates this not through a long, drawn-out death scene, but through an absence. One of the Guardians of Eternal Youth, afterward, in the quiet that follows the battle, holds up a small locket from the rubble. It is the locket that Walks gave Desdemona. The Guardian holds it up, and the episode does not need to say anything else. The locket is there. Desdemona is not. Everything that needs to be understood is understood in that single image, and the show has the confidence to leave it there and let the silence do its work. What happens next is rendered in a brief sequence set some years years after the prom. Walks is brought before the guardians of eternal youth, and he is changed in the way that grief changes people who carry it without support. He has unkempt stubble. He is rougher than he was. The lightness that Desdemona drew out of him is gone, and what remains is the version of Walks that is recognizable as the early stages of the Skips the viewer knows. Quiet, contained, carrying something heavy that he has decided not to put down. The guardians offer him immortality. They explain that Clorgbane will return every 157 years, and that Walks is the only being capable of defeating him when he does. The immortality is not a gift so much as a responsibility. Walks accepts it. He also changes his name. He stops walking and starts skipping. The show does not explain this explicitly within the episode. It leaves the connection between the name change and the loss of Desdemona as something the viewer has to complete themselves. He was Walks before. After everything that happened, after the night that took her and left him, he became Skips. The skip itself is a kind of permanent motion, a refusal to stop, a body that will not slow down to the pace that grief would prefer. He skips because walking, the thing he did when he was someone who loved someone and had not yet lost her, belongs to a version of himself that no longer exists. Mordecai and Rigby receive all of this in silence. When the story ends, Mordecai says quietly that it was kind of a downer. Rigby asks whether Skips graduated, which is exactly the kind of thing Rigby would ask, and it functions as the episode's gentle exhale after everything that preceded it. The show does not reach for a larger lesson. It does not try to wrap the story in something that makes it easier to hold. It just lets Mordecai and Rigby sit with what they have been given, with the knowledge that the large, silent, infinitely competent being who has been fixing their problems since season 1 has been carrying this for longer than they can fully comprehend. Skip's story does something essential for the series as a whole. It provides the emotional foundation for every scene Skips has ever been in, and every scene he will ever be in. The competence, the silence, the willingness to help without being asked, the refusal to be drawn into emotional conversations. All of it now has a source. He is not stoic because stoicism is simply his personality. He is stoic because he constructed that stillness around something that could not be repaired, and he has been maintaining the construction for centuries. The immortality that the Guardians gave him is both a gift and a sentence. He will keep going. He will keep helping. He will keep showing up, and the one person he would have wanted to show up for cannot benefit from any of it. The swimming rule makes sense now too. The specific detail that opens the episode, Skips' insistence on waiting after eating, is never explained within the story itself, but the episode frames it as belonging to the same category as the birthday ritual from Free Cake, as one of the small, particular practices that Skips maintains because he has lived long enough to understand that small, particular practices are how you keep yourself intact when the larger things have come apart. He waits after eating because someone taught him to, someone who is not there anymore. The rule is a way of keeping her present in the only way that remains available to him. Regular Show produced emotional episodes throughout its run. It was better at warmth than almost any animated series of its generation. But Skips' story operates at a different register than warmth. It operates in the territory of genuine grief, the kind that does not resolve and does not diminish and simply becomes part of the structure of a person over time. The show handles that territory with extraordinary care, and it does so while still being fundamentally a regular show episode, still finding room for the Guardians of Eternal Youth and a prom with an under-the-sea theme and Rigby asking about graduation. The comedy and the sorrow exist in the same space without canceling each other out, which is the hardest thing in the world to do, and the thing Regular Show did better than almost anyone. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Skip's story gave the show's most silent character his most human moment. Next, we move to Season 7, where Rigby finally does something nobody expected him to do, and the whole park watches him become someone worth believing in. Section 8, Rigby's Graduation Day Special, the one where Rigby grew up. There is a moment in every long-running series where a character who has been defined largely by their limitations does something that transcends those limitations, and the show earns that moment completely because it spent years laying the groundwork for it. These moments do not arrive suddenly. They are built slowly, episode by episode, through 1,000 small failures and reluctant corrections and incremental shifts that are easy to miss in isolation, but add up to something real over time. Rigby's Graduation Day Special is that moment for Regular Show. It aired on June 30th, 2016, as the half-hour season finale of Season 7, and it gave Rigby something the show had been quietly steering him toward since the very beginning. A chance to stand in front of people who doubted him, including himself, and prove that the distance between who he was and who he could be was not as enormous as everyone assumed. Understanding why the episode lands the way it does requires understanding what Rigby had been across the 7 seasons that preceded it. He is introduced in Season 1 as the more reckless half of the central duo, the one whose impulses drive most of the chaos, the one who lies and schemes games and drags Mordecai into situations that neither of them is equipped to handle. He dropped out of high school. This fact, established early and returned to periodically across the show's run, functions as a kind of shorthand for Rigby's relationship with his own potential. He is capable of more than he allows himself to attempt. He knows this on some level. The show knows this. And the gap between what Rigby is capable of and what Rigby actually does is one of the most consistently interesting tensions in regular show's character work. Season 7 made Rigby's high school completion a central thread. He enrolled, he attended classes, he managed the dual difficulty of being a student and a park worker simultaneously, which for someone with Rigby's attention span and his particular relationship with effort was not a small thing. The show did not dedicate every episode to this storyline, but it returned to it consistently enough that by the time the finale arrived, the graduation felt earned in a way that a single episode resolution never could have managed. The viewer had watched Rigby work for this, not easily, not gracefully, but genuinely, which was the thing that mattered. The episode opens with a shot that the show constructs with unusual care. A dandelion releases its seeds, and the camera follows one seed as it drifts across the park, past each member of the crew going about their morning. High-five Ghost blowing the dandelion, Pops chasing a butterfly, Muscle Man and Starla sharing pie, Skips working on his Volkswagen. The seed drifts past a sign announcing Rigby's graduation party, past Mr. Mellard shaking hands with a scientist named Dr. Langer, and finally comes to rest near Rigby, who accidentally swallows it. The sequence takes its time. It is an establishing shot that functions as something more than establishing, as a portrait of a world at a particular moment, everyone in their place, everything about to shift. Rigby gets a phone call from his school principal, a man named Dean. There is a problem with the graduation speech. The student who is supposed to deliver it has backed out. Dean wants Rigby to fill in. He needs someone to give an inspirational speech at the ceremony, the kind of speech that makes people cry and dance at the end, like the segments on a television show called Inspire America that Rigby watches and mocks regularly. Rigby, who has spent 7 seasons running from exactly this kind of exposure, is terrified. But he agrees. He goes back to the park and tells Mordecai, and this is where the episode reveals its second story, the one running alongside Rigby's graduation. Mordecai is not doing well. The episode does not announce this loudly. It lets it emerge gradually, through small moments that accumulate into a picture of someone who has been left behind in a way he cannot quite articulate. Rigby is graduating from high school. Eileen, who is Rigby's closest friend outside of Mordecai and who works at the coffee shop, is graduating from college the same day. Everyone around Mordecai is completing things, moving forward, achieving something that marks progress in a legible way. Mordecai, who is still at the park doing the same job he was doing in season 1, feels the contrast acutely. He does not say this in so many words. He does not need to. The moment that crystallizes Mordecai's state comes when Rigby, in the middle of joking about his graduation, inadvertently says something that cuts deeper than he intends. He makes an offhand comment about probably graduating college before Mordecai does, meaning it as the kind of light ribbing that passes between old friends without consequence. But Mordecai goes quiet in a way that Rigby does not notice immediately, and the camera stays on Mordecai's face long enough for the viewer to see what the comment landed on. Not anger. Something quieter and more uncomfortable than anger. The recognition that Rigby might be right. Benson is dealing with his own parallel story. The scientists who have been conducting a mysterious dome experiment over the park have finished their work and are packing up. This means that Dr. Langer, a scientist Benson has been quietly developing feelings for, is leaving. The show has given Benson a romantic subplot across season 7 that has been handled with the same gentle care it applies to most of its character relationships. He is not a figure of romantic comedy in the usual sense. He is a gumball machine who manages a park and takes his responsibilities seriously. And watching him navigate the specific vulnerability of caring about someone who might not stay is one of the season's more understated pleasures. When he realizes Langer is leaving, he handles it the way Benson handles most difficult things, by eating enormous quantities of chicken wings alone at a restaurant while staring at nothing. Meanwhile, Skips and Muscle Man and High-Five Ghost are dealing with a discovery at the park that the dome experiment has accidentally revealed. The dome, it turns out, was not simply a scientific exercise. There is something underneath it, a button, and the button, when pressed, will launch the entire park dome into space. The scientists leave without fully explaining this. The park workers are left standing around a button that could send their entire world off the planet, unsure of what to do with the information and unable to reach anyone who might clarify. These 3 storylines, Rigby's speech preparation, Mordecai's quiet crisis, and the park's imminent departure into space, run alongside each other throughout the episode with the easy confidence of a show that knows how to manage multiple emotional registers simultaneously. Regular Show in its 7th season had become very good at this kind of structural weaving. It could hold a comedic subplot, an emotional subplot, and a plot-critical development in the same episode without any of them feeling underdeveloped or rushed. The dome revelation is the plot. Mordecai's jealousy is the emotional core. Rigby's graduation is the celebration. The episode needs all three to be complete. Rigby's speech preparation goes badly at first, in the specific way that Rigby's preparations always go badly. He practices in front of Skips and Pops and high-five Ghost on the roof of a golf cart, and the speech he delivers is an exercise in self-promotion rather than inspiration. He comes in on a skateboard. He calls himself the Rigbone. He has note cards that he drops and cannot reassemble in order. Skips shakes his head. The speech is not good. It is not even close to good, and Rigby knows it, but he does not know how to fix it because he does not yet understand what the speech is supposed to be about. Mordecai, who has been spiraling quietly throughout the episode, reaches his lowest point while driving through the desert on an errand. He passes a series of road signs that seem designed specifically to address his current state. Going nowhere, life in a rut, feel like a loser, and then, most devastatingly, an Inspire America billboard featuring a photograph of Rigby, advertising an upcoming segment about his graduation journey. Mordecai throws the errand out the window of the car. He turns around. He drives back to the ceremony angry and ashamed and unable to fully explain either feeling. At the graduation, things go wrong in the way things always go wrong in regular show, which is quickly and completely. Rigby's first attempt at the speech is a disaster. He drops the note cards again. He tries to recover and cannot. The audience is waiting. Dean is waiting. Everyone is waiting, and Rigby is standing at the podium with nothing to say that is worth saying. He leaves the stage. Mordecai finds him backstage, and here is where the episode does the thing that separates it from a simple graduation story. Mordecai, who has been carrying his own hurt and his own jealousy throughout the entire episode, sets it down. Not because it stopped mattering, not because he has resolved his complicated feelings about where his own life is going, but because he is standing in front of his best friend at the moment that his best friend needs him most, and that matters more than everything else. He apologizes for being unfair. He tells Rigby that when he heard him embarrassing himself up there, he realized how wrong he had been. He tells Rigby that it is amazing that he worked this hard to get here, that he graduated, that he did it. What Mordecai says next is the emotional hinge of the entire episode. He tells Rigby that if he can do this, then that means something. He starts to say what it means, and Rigby stops him. He tells Mordecai to wait. He takes the note cards back, and then he goes back out onto the stage, and he delivers a speech. The speech Rigby gives is not polished. It does not have the structure of something carefully prepared. It is honest in the way that only things said in the moment can be honest, without the protection that preparation provides. He talks about what it was like to be the person everyone expected to fail. He talks about what it took to keep going anyway. He talks about what it means to have someone who believed in you before you believed in yourself. The crowd listens. Then they respond. Not with the choreographed crying and dancing of Inspire America, but with something quieter and more real. They believe him because the speech is believable. It comes from somewhere true. Then the dome launches into space. This happens immediately after the graduation, because regular show is still regular show, even in its most emotionally significant moments, and the park being sent into orbit by a mysterious scientific button is exactly the kind of consequence the show has always been comfortable delivering without warning. The crew is together on the dome as it rises. Margaret, watching from below, calls Mordecai's name. Muscleman's girlfriend Starla calls his real name, Mitch, as the dome lifts away. CJ, who has appeared one final time as a tour guide, watches from a distance. The season ends with the park in space, everyone aboard, heading into a final season that will take the show further from its origins than it has ever gone. The dandelion seed that drifted through the opening shot of the episode appears one more time in the final frames, floating now in the emptiness beyond the dome, carried by a force that has no particular direction and no particular destination, just moving forward the way things do when there is nothing left to hold them in place. Rigby's Graduation Day special works as a finale because it does not pretend that growth is clean or final or fully visible to the person doing the growing. Rigby graduated from high school. He delivered a speech that mattered. He is still Rigby. He will still make bad decisions and drag Mordecai into situations that neither of them is equipped to handle. But he is also someone who stood in front of a crowd and told the truth about himself. And that is not nothing. That is actually quite a lot for someone who spent 7 seasons running from exactly that kind of exposure. The episode understands what the best regular show episodes always understand, that the small things are never just small things. A trucker's hat, a bunch of baby ducks, a chocolate cake, a graduation speech. The show was always interested in what these ordinary objects and occasions carried underneath them, what they meant to the specific people who wanted them, or feared them, or worked toward them against all reasonable expectation. Rigby graduated. The park went to space. Mordecai put his friend first. None of it was small. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Rigby's graduation sent the park into space and opened the final season. Next, we arrive at the end of everything. The last battle, the longest goodbye, and the episode that made an entire generation generation of viewers cry over a cartoon about a blue jay and a raccoon. Section 9. A regular epic final battle. The goodbye. There are finales that end a show, and there are finales that complete one. The difference is not about scale or spectacle, though both of those things can be present in either kind. The difference is about whether the ending feels earned by everything that came before it, whether the final moments carry the weight of the whole story, rather than just the weight of the last episode. Regular show's series finale, A Regular Epic Final Battle, aired on January 16, 2017, as a one-hour special comprising the final 2 episodes of Season 8. It was the 254th and 255th episodes of the series overall. It had been building in some form since the very first season, since the earliest hints that the world of the park extended further than anyone could see from the grounds. When it arrived, it did not disappoint. It completed the show, and it did so in a way that left the people who grew up with regular show with something they will carry for a long time. Understanding the finale requires understanding what the 8th season had been building toward. Season 8 sent the park into space, following directly from the launch at the end of Rigby's graduation day special. The crew spent the season aboard the dome, moving through a universe that regular show had been expanding since Free Cake, encountering new threats and new allies, and gradually assembling the pieces of a mythology that the show had been laying down across 7 years. At the center of that mythology was Pops. Gentle, warm, lollipop-headed Pops, the character who had functioned across the entire series as the show's purest emotional register, the one who was delighted by butterflies and kind to everyone and incapable of genuine malice. Pops, it turned out, was not simply the park owner's son. He was something ancient and specific. He was the embodiment of one side of a cosmic cycle, and somewhere in the universe, his counterpart, Anti-Pops, had been waiting. The mythology the show constructed around this is elemental in its simplicity. The universe operates in cycles. At the end of each cycle, Pops and Anti-Pops find each other and fight. Anti-Pops wins. Everything is destroyed. The cycle resets. This has happened before, many times, across an expanse of time that makes the centuries of Skips' immortality look brief. The difference this cycle, the reason the show gives for why this time might be different, is the park crew. Pops has people now. He has relationships and history and the specific accumulated warmth of years spent in the company of beings who genuinely love him. Anti-Pops has none of that. He has power. Pops has something else. The finale opens with a sequence that sends Mordecai and Rigby backward, reliving the events of the show's very first episode. They are back at the park in the early days, back to the version of themselves that existed before 7 seasons of growth and consequence and supernatural adventure. The power, the magical keyboard that started everything in the pilot, is back in their hands. They are making the same mistakes they made at the beginning. For a moment, it feels like a reset, like the show is retreating from everything it built. And then the moment cracks open. They remember. They remember all of it. Every episode, every battle, every loss and reunion, an impossible thing they survived together. They use the keyboard to go back, to where the crew is, to where Pops needs them. The battle itself is set on a planet at the edge of the universe, and the show renders it with an ambition that the animation team clearly poured everything into. Anti-Pops is enormous in his malevolence, not theatrical in the way the show's earlier villains were theatrical, but genuinely threatening in the way that something ancient and indifferent is threatening. He does not hate the park crew. He barely registers them as relevant. What he wants is the end of the cycle, the destruction of everything, the universe reset and blank again. The crew fights him because fighting is what they do, and because Pops is their friend, and because there is no version of any of them that walks away from this. The fighting sequences are large and kinetic, and give every member of the crew their moment. Mordecai and Rigby fight together the way they have always fought together, through a combination of stubbornness and improvisation, and the specific synergy of 2 people who have known each other long enough that they do not need to communicate to coordinate. Skips is formidable in the way that Skips is always formidable, which is quietly and completely. Muscle Man fights with the abandon of someone who has decided the outcome does not matter as much as the participation. Benson fights with the fury of a person who has spent years being underestimated. High Five Ghost moves through the chaos with the particular grace of someone who has never been fully defined by the show and is therefore free to be whatever the moment requires. But the fight cannot be won this way. The show is honest about that. The crew can delay, they can protect, they can hold the line long enough for something else to happen. But Anti-Pops cannot be defeated by force, because the cycle does not end through force. It has never ended through force. That is what every previous iteration of this encounter has demonstrated, across all the cycles that came before, and the crew slowly comes to understand that their fighting is not the solution. It is the context for the solution. Pops is the solution, and the solution Pops finds is not the one anyone expected. Throughout Season 8, Pops has been struggling with the knowledge of what he is and what he is supposed to do. He does not want to fight Anti-Pops. He does not want to destroy his counterpart. counterpart, the being that exists as his opposite number in the cosmic arrangement. He has been told his whole life that the fight is inevitable, that one of them must win and the other must be destroyed. Everyone who loves him has been preparing him for a version of this confrontation that involves victory at terrible cost. And Pops, who has never in his entire existence been capable of wanting someone else to suffer, cannot make himself want that. He cannot become what the cycle says he must be. What he does instead is reach out. He approaches Anti-Pops not as an enemy, but as a brother. He uses the specific language of genuine connection, the language of someone who understands that the being in front of him is not simply an obstacle, but a mirror, a counterpart, another version of what he himself might have become. He offers something that no previous version of Pops has ever offered, because no previous version had the relationships and the history and the accumulated evidence that kindness can change things. He offers recognition. He sees Anti-Pops, not the destroyer, not the enemy, the being who exists on the other side of the same coin. Anti-Pops does not immediately respond to this. The show does not make the resolution easy or quick. There is a moment, extended and uncertain, where it is not clear whether Pops's approach will work or whether the cycle will simply repeat as it always has. And then something shifts in Anti-Pops. Not a complete transformation, not a conversion, something smaller and more honest than either of those things. A crack in the certainty, a moment of hesitation that had never existed in any previous cycle, because no previous version of the confrontation had included someone willing to stop fighting and simply look. Pops holds Anti-Pops. This is the image the show chooses for the turning point. Not a final blow, not a dramatic defeat, an embrace. From someone who decided that being who he is mattered more than winning the way he was supposed to win. They hold each other, Pops and Anti-Pops, and they fly together into the nearest star. The cycle ends. Not through destruction, through completion. Through a version of resolution that the universe had never seen before, because the conditions for it had never existed before, because Pops had never had a park crew before, had never had people who showed him by example that connection was worth more than victory. The explosion is enormous and bright, and the crew shields their eyes from it. When the light fades, Pops is gone. The show takes its time with what follows. It does not rush through the grief. It lets the crew stand in the quiet after the light and feel what has happened to them. Skips, who has outlived everything and has more experience of loss than anyone else present, does not have a solution for this. There is no ritual that restores what just ended. There is no notebook from a previous attempt that contains the technique for surviving this particular kind of absence. Pops is gone, and the universe continues, and the crew has to decide what to do with that. They go home. The park returns to Earth, and the dome comes down, and everyone finds their way back to the grounds that have always been the center of the show's world. They build a statue of Pops on the park grounds. It is simple and good, and in exactly the right place. Then the show moves forward in time, and this is where the finale does something that very few series endings have the courage to do. It shows what happened to everyone. 25 years pass in a montage, and the montage is specific in the way that regular show at its best was always specific. Mordecai quits his job at the park. He becomes a painter, which is something the show established early and returned to occasionally as a quiet indicator of who Mordecai might be underneath the slacking and the video games. He meets someone, a Batwoman who the show renders with deliberate vagueness and builds a life with her. The show implies without stating that Margaret and CJ both move on, that Mordecai moves on from them, that the romantic entanglements that drove so much of the middle seasons resolve in a way that is honest rather than tidy. He uses likenesses of people he loved in his paintings. That is how he carries them. Rigby marries Eileen. They have children. The photograph in the wall of the Rigby house in Terror Tales of the Park, the detail the show planted in season 3 and never drew attention to, becomes a life. They are happy in the specific, unpretentious way that suits them both, and the show renders their future with a warmth that feels completely earned by everything that came before. Muscle Man and Starla move into a nicer trailer and have more children, continuing a life that is exactly what Muscle Man always wanted, even when he did not have the language to say so clearly. High Five Ghost and his girlfriend Celia become successful DJs in Prague, which is genuinely unexpected and completely right for a character who was always slightly detached from the show's main emotional register, operating in his own quiet orbit. Benson gets together with Dr. Langer. They raise 4 cats and a pig. He becomes the park manager after Mr. Mellard's death, a transition the show handles in a single line that carries enormous weight because of everything Benson and Mellard's relationship contained across 8 seasons. He trains a new group of workers who look like younger versions of the crew he had. The cycle continues, smaller and quieter than the cosmic version, but a cycle nonetheless. Skips is still at the park, still single, still working. He wears shorts now instead of jeans, which is the only visible change, and the show offers this detail without comment. It does not need comment. Skips will keep going. He will keep fixing things. He has done it for centuries, and he will do it for centuries more, and the specific people he did it alongside for these particular years will be part of what he carries. The way Desdemona is part of what he carries. The way everything he has loved and outlived is part of what he carries. The shorts are a small thing. Nothing about Skips is only a small thing. 25 years after the finale, the full crew returns to the park for a reunion. Mordecai and Rigby stand together in front of Pops' statue, and they talk about him the way people talk about someone they lost when the loss has had time to settle into something they can live with. They reflect on how immature they used to be, which is the kind of thing you can only say with complete honesty from a distance of decades. Then they look at each other and do the thing they always did. They make the sound they made together since the beginning of the series, the wordless, rising noise that expressed surprise and delight and the pleasure of being exactly who they were. They laugh. The camera pulls back. The last image is a television set, somewhere bright and peaceful. A VHS tape labeled "Regular Show" ejects from the player. Pops sighs. He says, "Jolly good show." It is the perfect ending. Not because it is surprising, though the choice to close on Pops rather than on Mordecai and Rigby is a meaningful one. It is perfect because it is honest about what the show was and what it meant. Jolly good show is not a triumphal declaration. It is a gentle, warm assessment from a being who watched everything with love and found it worthwhile. That is all Regular Show ever asked to be. Worthwhile, warm, a place you could return to and find something good waiting. It succeeded at that more completely than almost any animated series of its era. The finale did not just end the show, it honored it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The finale gave everyone the ending they deserved and sent Pops off with all the grace the show could give him. Now, in our final section, we step back from the individual episodes and look at the full shape of what Regular Show was, what made it extraordinary, and why it remains one of the easiest and most comforting things in the world to fall asleep to. Section 10. What made Regular Show extraordinary? A final reflection. There is a version of this conversation that ends with a list of reasons. Regular Show was well written. It had memorable characters. Its animation was distinctive. Its mythology was carefully constructed. Its emotional range was wider than most animated series of its era were willing to explore. All of those things are true, and all of them are accurate ways of describing what the show did well. But none of them quite get at the thing that made Regular Show feel different from the outside. The quality that people reach for when they try to explain why they still think about it years after it ended. Why they put it on when they cannot sleep, or when they need the specific comfort of something familiar and warm. Lists of reasons do not capture that. What captures it is closer to a feeling, and the feeling is this. Regular Show understood what it meant to spend your days in a place with people you chose, doing work that was beneath you, and finding that the place and the people were actually the whole thing. That sounds simple. It is not simple. Very few pieces of art, animated or otherwise, manage to make that particular truth feel as real and as earned as Regular Show made it feel across 8 seasons. The show was built on a premise that was almost aggressively ordinary. Two friends work at a park. They do not want to be there. They would rather be playing video games or watching television or doing essentially anything other than the specific tasks their boss assigns them. The park is not glamorous. The work is not meaningful in any large sense. And yet the show, from its very first season, treated that park as if it were the most important place in the world. Because for the people in it, it was. J.G. Quintel has spoken in interviews about the autobiographical roots of the show, about the way it drew on his own experience of being in his early 20s and working jobs that did not feel like destinations, spending time with friends in the specific way that young people spend time together when none of them quite know what comes next. That experience of being between things, of existing in a present that feels temporary but keeps extending, is one that a large portion of the show's audience recognized immediately. Regular Show did not romanticize that experience or mock it. It simply inhabited it with complete honesty and considerable affection, and let the supernatural elements be the expression of how enormous and strange ordinary life can feel from the inside when you are living it without a map. The supernatural was never the point. This is worth saying clearly, because a surface reading of Regular Show might conclude that the show was primarily about its escalating premises, about the way that a simple errand to get chocolate cake turns into a confrontation with magical floating babies, or the way that a lost bet about arm wrestling ends with Skips challenging Death himself. Those escalations are genuinely enjoyable. They are constructed with craft and wit and a consistent internal logic that rewards attention. But they were always in service of something else. The supernatural was the vehicle. The friendship was the destination. Mordecai and Rigby's relationship is the load-bearing structure of the entire series. Remove it and nothing else holds. The mythology collapses. The supporting characters lose their context. The park loses its meaning. Everything the show built across 8 seasons was built around the specific texture of these two particular beings and what they meant to each other, which was everything. Even when they were being terrible to each other. Even when the selfishness and the immaturity and the spectacular poor decision-making were at their worst. The show understood that real friendships are not always kind, are not always functional, are not always easy to defend to an outside observer. They are held together by something that does not have a clean name, by history and habit, and the accumulated weight of having been through things together that nobody else was there for. Mordecai and Rigby had that. The show honored it consistently, across more than 250 episodes, without ever making it saccharine or false. The supporting cast is the reason the show's world felt inhabitable, rather than merely populated. Benson could have been a simple antagonist, a boss whose only function was to threaten the characters with firing and then not follow through. The show was not satisfied with that. It gave him loneliness and professional pride and a genuine love for the park that mirrored the love the viewer developed for it over time. It gave him bad dates and worse timing and the specific frustration of a person who cares deeply about something that the people around him treat carelessly. And then it gave him Dr. Langer and a future with 4 cats and a pig and the park manager's office that he had been working toward without knowing it for 8 seasons. Benson's arc is not the central arc of regular show, but it is a complete arc, and the show tracked it with care from beginning to end. Skips is the character who grows most across the series without ever appearing to grow at all. He is the same in the final season as he is in the first, outwardly. Same walk, same economy of expression, same willingness to solve any problem put in front of him without making a fuss about it. But the viewer who has followed the show from Free Cake through Skip's story through the finale knows what is underneath that consistency. They know about Desdemona and the prom, and the locket in the rubble, and the centuries of carrying something that could not be put down. They know that the skipping is not simply a character quirk, but a form of ongoing grief made physical, a body that cannot stop moving because stopping would mean settling into the weight of everything it has outlived. That knowledge transforms every Skip scene retroactively. He is the same character. He is also entirely different once you know what he contains. Pops is the show's heart in the most literal sense. He is the character whose emotional register the show returns to whenever it needs to remind the viewer what it is fundamentally about. He is delighted by small things. He is kind to everyone without calculation or condition. He does not have a cynical mode. He cannot access irony in the way the other characters cannot use detachment as protection, because detachment is simply not available to him. For most of the series, this reads as gentle comedy, as the endearing obliviousness of someone who exists at a slight remove from the world's harder edges. In Season 8, when the show reveals what Pops actually is and what the universe has always required of him, that quality becomes something else entirely. His inability to want anti-Pops destroyed is not naivety. It is the fullest possible expression of who he is. He was always going to end the cycle that way. The show had been showing the viewer that truth since the beginning. One butterfly and one butterscotch ripple at a time. Muscle Man and High Five Ghost are often treated as the show's comedic relief, and they are funny, genuinely and consistently funny across the entire run. But the show gave them more than that. It gave Muscle Man a love story with Starla that it treated with complete seriousness, and it gave him a mother he adored and missed, and invoked constantly in a joke that accumulated genuine emotional weight the longer it ran. It gave High Five Ghost a quiet presence that the show used deliberately, understanding that a character who does not demand attention can become the one whose moments land hardest precisely because they are not expected. Both of them became more than their function. Both of them became people, in the way that the best animated characters become people, by accumulating specificity over time until the specificity adds up to something that feels real. What regular show did with its 8 seasons is build a world that the viewer wanted to live in, not because it was perfect or safe or free from consequence, but because it was inhabited by beings who cared about each other in ways that felt true. The park itself became a character in this way, not metaphorically. The park grounds, the house, the snack bar, the cart path, the fountain where the baby ducks were found, the garage where Skips worked on his Volkswagen, the crash pit that turned out to be real. All of these places accumulated meaning through association, through the episodes that happened in them and around them, until by the finale, the threat to destroy the park in Exit 9B felt like a genuine loss, and the return to the park grounds in the final episode felt like coming home. The sleep-friendly quality of regular show is not incidental to what it is. It is not simply that the show is calm enough to fall asleep to, though in its quieter moments it can be very calm. It is that the show creates the specific feeling of being somewhere you belong, with people you trust, in a situation where even the worst things that happen are survivable, because the relationships that matter are still intact. That feeling is the emotional equivalent of a weighted blanket. It does not solve anything, it just makes the night easier to get through. Regular show offered that feeling consistently across its entire run, and it did so without ever becoming boring or predictable, without ever losing the wildness and the strangeness that gave the warmth its texture. The generation that grew up with regular show grew up with it during the specific years when the questions it was exploring felt most immediate. What do you do when you are 23 and working a job that does not feel like a destination? What do you do when the person you have been since childhood is not quite the person you want to become, and the distance between those two versions of yourself feels too large to cross. What do you do when the people you love do something that costs them everything, and all you can do is be there when it happens and keep going afterward? Regular Show did not answer these questions. It never pretended to. What it did was sit with them, episode after episode, season after season, with a warmth and an honesty that made the sitting feel worthwhile. The finale gave everyone an ending, not a resolution of everything. People do not get resolutions of everything. They get the life they built and the people still in it, and the memory of the ones who are not. And they carry all of that forward into the years that remain. Mordecai became a painter. Rigby married Eileen. Skips kept going. Pops said, "Jolly good show," and the screen went to static and the series was over. It was the right ending because it was honest, and Regular Show was always, at its core, an honest show, even when it was being completely, magnificently absurd. The absurdity and the honesty were never in conflict. That is the thing the show understood that most shows do not. The giant floating head and the arm wrestling match with Death, and the baby ducks that turned into a karate warrior, and the park being launched into space, all of it was real within its universe, and all of it was in service of something that did not require the supernatural to be true. Friendship is worth fighting for. Loss changes you and does not unchange you. The place you spend your ordinary days becomes extraordinary by virtue of what you do there. Growing up is not a single moment, but a long series of small moments, most of which do not feel significant while they are happening. Regular Show knew all of this. It told it to anyone willing to watch for 11 minutes at a time, twice a week for 8 seasons. And then Pops leaned back and said, "Jolly good show," and the tape ejected, and the butterflies went wherever butterflies go, and the park stood quietly on the earth, under a sky that had seen everything and held its peace. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.